Hey everybody, we are already on Unit 4, Lecture number 3. We are cruising along. This is all about extending our knowledge on classical conditioning and building on the knowledge we already have through our other lecture and practicing in class. And so hopefully by now you have enough knowledge to understand my super cool meme. Why was Pavlov's hair so soft? Because he conditioned it. Bump. Okay, here's our learning targets. Get into it. Here we go. Who is this guy? This is J.B.WATSON. He is a big kahuna in the world of psychology. Why is he so big and important? Not just because of that snappy style of dress he's got on there, but because he is the founder of behaviorism. So the field of psychology that is based on observation and learning and reinforcement. And in 1908, by 1908, he was only 30 years old, and he was already the psychology chair at Johns Hopkins University. So he went up in the world of psychology very, very quickly. And within 5 years from there, he wrote something that was nicknamed the Behaviorist Manifesto, which is basically how to become a behavioral psychologist in 3 easy steps. I'm exaggerating. These are my words. These are my version of his Behaviorist Manifesto. But he believed that when someone studies psychology, or a psychologist should be studying only behavior. So the only content of psychology should be behavior, not someone's feelings or emotions. That psychology should be objective, not introspective, that it should be something black and white, right and wrong, that each behavioral psychologist can identify the same. So no gray area, again, no interpretation by the subject in terms of like their feelings or emotions. And that the goal should be the prediction and control of behavior rather than understanding mental events. So it is more important as a psychologist to, yes, predict and control what a human is going to do instead of just understanding why they do what they do. Watson is best known for his Little Albert or Baby Albert experiment. And he and his assistant, Rosalie Rayner, conditioned fear into an 11-month-old child, nicknamed Little Albert. So how did they do that? Well, they took a gong. If you don't know what a gong is, it's a big metal disc, it's like a giant cymbal, and when you hit it, it goes bong really loud. And just like it would to anyone who's not expecting it, it would produce fear. And they paired that sound with the sight of a mouse. Now, on its own, to an 11-month-old, just seeing a mouse elicits no real response. If anything, they might think that that mouse is interesting or cute, but certainly not a fearful response. And so over time, Watson took an unconditioned stimulus, and that elicited an unconditioned response, and he paired it with a neutral stimulus to create a conditioned response. In this experiment, at the acquisition stage, so combining the neutral stimulus to the unconditioned stimulus, the subject, Little Albert, acquired a sense of fear to a mouse, taking something neutral, pairing it with something else that provokes that natural fear or jump or startle, and Little Albert learns to fear that mouse. So now the mouse is a conditioned stimulus and fears the conditioned response. So the baby is not naturally afraid of the mouse. It is because the mouse is paired with that loud gong sound that the baby learns the mouse means fear. I should be afraid of the mouse, okay? It only took 7 rounds of this for baby Albert or Little Albert to become afraid of the mouse. And then, to make matters worse, every 5 days, Watson would repeat this experiment to strengthen that fear of the fuzzy white mouse. And I say it like that for a reason, which I'll get to in just a second. So what happened to Little Albert over time, besides Watson traumatizing him? Well, his fear became generalized to other white furry fuzzy items. So think like Santa's beard, or a white fur coat, or another animal like a little puppy that was white and fuzzy. Albert became afraid of anything with those qualities. And then, coincidentally, not because of Watson, but little Albert's family moved away before Watson could uncondition the fear in Albert. So we ultimately don't really know what happened to Albert. However, most psychologists agree that little Albert likely didn't remain afraid of furry things because of a term we learned in our last lecture, and that is extinction. So remember, extinction is basically when that conditioned response fades. So if Watson did not continue to strengthen the response, that conditioned response of being afraid to the mouse, presenting the unconditioned stimulus, the mouse, it would more than likely go away in time. So I've got some more good memes in this unit. This is not Watson, but I don't always scare babies. But when I do, it's for psychology. Okay, so we're not quite done with Watson. This one is the fall and rise of Watson. And yes, I said that funny. So when we first learn about Watson and little Albert, he is at the top of his game and he is at the cutting edge of the research involving behaviorism. But then he becomes romantically involved with Miss Rosalie Rayner. And it's a big scandal because not only is she his assistant, but they're both married. Wah, wah. So he is forced to retire from research in psychology. No, you do not need to know that specific detail. It just makes for a juicy story. But why it's important is that he leaves traditional institutional settings and he gets a job with J. Walter Thompson Advertising Agency. And this is where he learns to use behavioral psych techniques to sell products. So he becomes kind of a marketing genius. And he shows that people's preferences between rival products are not actually based on on the sensory qualities of this shampoo literally makes my hair softer or better, but rather on their associations. Like, I'm going to use this shampoo because Marilyn Monroe uses this shampoo and she's got gorgeous hair and she's a fabulous movie star back in the olden days. Some of the advertisements that he is responsible for became some of the agency's most successful ad campaigns ever. He was responsible for Maxwell House Coffee's campaign that people should be able to take a coffee break while at work. He convinced the queens of Romania and Spain, arguably he probably paid them, to give a testimonial for Pond's cold cream, which is just a face lotion, but basically convincing women around the United States that if these queens use this Pond's cream, you should too, because then your face will be just like that of the queens. And that mothers should use Johnson's baby powder after every diaper change. And guess what happens if you use it after every diaper change? You use it up and you need to buy more. Do you need to write all of these down or know all of these? No, but the big takeaway is that Watson, while he started off a research psychologist and a very powerful one as president of the APA and head of the psych department at Johns Hopkins, he fell from grace having this affair, but then he rose again by teaching the advertising world that they can use psychology to sell products. And so he did, in the end, get an award from the APA, a gold medal for his contributions to the field of psychology. So he kind of had a roller coaster of a career, but he is a legend in the field of psychology. So what's our takeaway? Well, Watson had a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of things we can get from him. But one more thing that needs to be mentioned is the idea of counter-conditioning. This, by definition, is replacing bad emotional responses to a stimulus with more pleasant or adaptive responses. So we don't just need to train children to be afraid of mice, or we don't just need to train dogs to salivate to a bell, but we can actually use conditioning to untrain conditioned experiences, specifically things like phobias or other anxiety disorders. So counter-conditioning teaches patients to respond in a relaxed manner to a conditioned stimulus until eventually the previous conditioned response is extinct. So take, for example, a phobia of snakes. By pairing a snake with a relaxation technique over and over and over again, eventually a person can be taught to not fear snakes anymore. This can also be used for taste aversion and trying to train someone to not have a sick response to food that they might not like. Okay, so I think we're on the next page of your notes, but it's time to extend Pavlov's work, or the final say. I should maybe rephrase this as like the final say of Pavlov's work. Both Pavlov and Watson considered consciousness, the mind, our thinking, our thoughts, not fit for the scientific study of psychology. It's too subjective. People can report their feelings incorrectly. Psychologists don't really know how to measure what goes on in someone's mind. But they were super flawed with this conclusion because they underestimated the importance of the cognitive processes and biological constraints upon learning. Okay, but so even though some of our early behaviorists believed that the behaviors of animals could be reduced to mindless mechanisms, humans included, like we would just become robots that could be programmed to respond to things in certain ways, that no, we're not just robots. Even regular animals, non-human animals, aren't just robots to be programmed. That there's more to it than that. That there is cognition. So as you take notes on Rescorla, Rescorla's big deal thing, the number one takeaway for Rescorla is that he believed cognition had to be part of classical conditioning. Here's what I mean by that. And this is going to be a mouthful, but I'm going to make it simple at the end. So just stay with me for a moment. Rescorla's contingency model said A is contingent, or dependent, upon B when A depends on B and vice versa. You're probably saying, what the huh? But the presence of a conditioned stimulus, like a bell, must predict the presence of the unconditioned stimulus, the food, or there won't be a response. So the subject, this is where it starts to get a little bit, you might have your aha moments, okay? This next bullet point might make a little bit more sense. The subject must be able to identify a clear and predictable pattern. Human bodies or animal bodies are not automatic for unconditioned stimulus. They need to be taught. They need to realize that if I sound this bell, it means food will come. I need to be able to think about that. If I'm a dog, I need to recognize that. I'm not just a switch it's not just a flip of a switch that I respond to a bell. So the dog must expect that food to come for that bell to create that salivation response, okay? So the presence of a conditioned stimulus, the bell must predict that the food is coming, or there won't be a response of something like salivation. We're going to do a couple examples of this. So let's imagine that you were called down to the office for 3 days in a row. Someone comes up to our door, gives us a pass, and 3 days in a row, you're called down to the office. On the 4th day, a pass is delivered to class. Based on the contingency model, you get out of your seat and you head out the door because you assume it's for you. Why? Because that pass so far has been contingent upon you being called to the office. Every time it's happened, you've been called to the office. There is a clear, predictable pattern. Okay? Whenever that pass is present, you are called to the office. So a predictable pattern. One is contingent on the other. One predicts or depends on the other. How does this apply to Pavlov? So the last 3 times he rang that bell, so it was bell, food, salivate, bell, food, salivate, bell, food, salivate. So it became so predictable to the dog that when he heard the bell, he salivated because he anticipated. He thought, this bell is contingent on the food. This bell is happening because my food is coming. There was cognition there. One more extension of this example. For 3 straight days, whenever a pass is delivered, a different student is called to the office. But the last one was for you. What would you assume from a pass on the 4th day? So one was for a student. The second one was for a student. That third one was for you. What are you going to assume for that 4th one? You are not going to automatically think it's for you. Nothing. You're going to do nothing. It has been different every single day. Why are you doing nothing? There is not a strong connection between the pass and you being called to the office. One event is not contingent or predicting the other. So what does this boil down to? And I've got this text box at the bottom. An individual's response to a stimulus is based on his cognitive expectations, that he thinks of what he thinks will happen, not just a knee-jerk response like you are just a robot or some biological organism that instantly responds to something like a pass being delivered. Okay, so what's the big takeaway for Rescorla? It's the same idea of classical conditioning, only that the pattern must be predictable and clear because the subject must think and recognize, have cognition of that pattern. This might be a little tricky, so if necessary, I will go through that one more time in class. But that's it.